Okay, Ableton 101 time. So first of all, when you first open the program, you see this, which is the mix window. This window is like used for seeing how high your levels are on each track. And as you create tracks, they show up here. So, to get out of the mix window, go to this button up here in the top right. This puts you in timeline display. So now we start adding stuff. So I'm just gonna grab a loop. But before we do that, we're gonna set the BPM to basically what all dance music is set to, which is 128 BPMs up there. That's how many beats per minute. Think of it like as a pulse or the ticking clock for the overall project. If you're working with audio that are just like voice effects, voice recordings, or just sound effects, you don't really need to set that. You can just leave it at stock or whatever it is. So, overview on this. This is music time bars. 1 bar, 2 bar, etc., etc., etc. Timeline is down here on the bottom. So this is how long your clip is. So I'm just going to drag in a simple loop for now. Now, this is your loop marker or selection. So we're just going to select that. This button up here sets it to loop. Make sure it's yellow. And then now it'll repeat over and over again. To play the track and play what you have on your timeline, click where you want the playhead to start and press spacebar. And then it does exactly what it's supposed to do. If you want to hear a certain part over and over again, you want to just like repeat something. So if you're trying to hear just like a certain sound that happens at a specific time, you can select up here where the music markers are. There's a little hourglass that appears. So if you click, left click and hold, drag down, you can zoom in. So say I just want to hear this hit over and over again. If you hold control and tap spacebar, it lets you just kind of rapid fire off that one clip again. And then just like keep tapping spacebar to re-trigger that like play starting point. Okay. Now let's go to a more fun section. I'm gonna clean up some of these extra tracks that I'm not using because they're just extra. We're gonna add something. There's two kinds of tracks in Ableton. There's MIDI tracks and there's audio tracks. Audio tracks are recorded files, so they can be things like waves, AACs, MP3s, etc., etc., etc. It's basically audio that's already been recorded in an audio format. The other kind of track is a MIDI track. Now, to add a MIDI track, you right-click here, insert MIDI track, and then we have it. MIDI tracks are synth or software instrument tracks. So now that we have a MIDI track, it's not really helping us at all. So we actually have to add in a clip. See how this has like a clip up here of your audio? We're going to add a MIDI clip. So you're going to select the region in which you want a MIDI clip to appear, or for however long you want to like work with it. I tend to do just like the loop range, just because it's just like an easy amount to start with, and if it's not enough, you can make it longer. So select your range, right click, insert MIDI clip. Another shortcut for that is Control-Shift-M, but we're just gonna do it this way because it's a little bit cleaner. Now, this I think would pair well with drums, right? And because we're at 120 BPM, we can just kind of add some just basic drums in, right? So I'm going to go to the drum rack. And because we're making drums in the program, we're going to use a MIDI track for this because we're going to do MIDI drums. So we're going to do, let's go through our drum kits. Let's find one we like. Boring, boring. That'll do. So I'll just drag that on top of that MIDI track. And now we have a drum rack. And so with this, you can see all the effects and everything that's going on down here. This is basically how the MIDI track is constructed. So all the instruments that are going on and all the clips it's triggering. Now, it may seem a little confusing because this is triggering audio clips with MIDI. But because we're using MIDI to trigger them, and we're not just working with a specific audio track, it has to go through that process because there's multiple ones I can choose from. So I'll just give you an example. So here's a kick, right? This is actually like a wave file. And so say we want the kick to appear on every quarter note because that's what dance music does. You left click twice on the MIDI clip that you've created. And this brings up a piano roll. And because we're doing this with drums, it already has all of like the different like drum effects already there. And our grid is at, oh, it's a relative grid. I'll just set it to 16 bars. You right click and you can set your grid length to however note length distance you want. So I'm just going to start with 16s because that's easy. So one there, one there, one there, one there. So now every quarter note's going to have a kick. Cool. Now I'll add a clap in on every 2 and 4. Okay, so now that we have kind of a simple drum kit working, I'm going to add in another MIDI clip just so I can show you guys how that works. So select the range, insert MIDI clip. Now let's make it a synth or just something that's like easy to work with that we can just kind of blend in there. So let's go to instruments. We'll just do pianos and keys and all right, that'll work. So now we're gonna do some piano editing, right? Cool little thing. If you press this button right here, that turns your keyboard into a musical keyboard. And you can select inputs for different things. So if you go, this is like your channel routing here, right? So if we go in, because it's a MIDI clip, we're routing how MIDI is routed on this track. So we're gonna go computer keyboard in, right? And so now if I press A, S, D, F, you can kind of find out which notes I want. So then we'll just kind of play along to this and see if I can find something that's kind of interesting. Kind of works. It's not great, but you get the idea. And say I want to record that, right? Because I think that's cool. So if you press this button right here, this arms your track for recording. A track has to be armed to record to it. So if you click that and then start your play ahead where you want it, and because we're looping, it's just going to play over and over and over again. So I'm just going to hit record. kind of liked that last part, right? To see all of the stuff you played during that, as you saw, it probably was overwriting with the MIDI, the loop, right? So if I drag it all the way over here, we can see all what we just looped and when we were playing. So I'll drag it over there, drag it out, and now it has the whole thing that I played. But in this case, I didn't really like the whole thing, so I'm just going to do the last part of it. Now, if I press play on it right now, you're not going to be able to hear it because it's still looking for MIDI data to come in. So you have to set it back so it's playing what's recorded. So that's this button right here. See how this is blue? Set it to auto. And then now it'll play back. So I'm just going to drag it back on top of where we were and play it. It's going to turn loop back on. Now, I noticed I didn't really like some of the notes I did there because they're kind of ill-timed because I suck at playing music. But because I know Ableton, I can suck less. So you select the note you want and then you want to move. And then it's the same sort of thing like as with the drums. You can just drag out how long you want the note to be held. The longer this is, the more time it is held. So I'm just going to do that right there. These notations mark where the note starts to play. So because it's musical, I want it kind of on the grid. So I'm going to do it there, there, and then we'll do this one kind of at the end there. So at least it hits on time. So let me play this back. Okay. Let's say I want to add reverb to this, right? Now, with MIDI tracks, you can just add effects the same way you would with audio tracks. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's start with just reverb, right? So put it there. I'm adjusting this dry wet knob, which is like how wet means how much the effect is being applied. Dry means how little or less, like how original the track is before you're adding the effect. So let me play it back. Cool. Now, there's the right way to do effects as well. If you want to have some, like, I kind of like, say I like part of that like reverb sound, but I don't want the whole thing to be like saturated in it, right? I want it sort of like just a little bit. So you can delete this one, for instance, and we're going to do it as a return track. So that's these tracks over here at the bottom of your session. These tracks are buses that you can send any clip that's in your timeline to. So if you take like this one and you say, I want this to have reverb on it, right? That's these right here. It's how much you're sending to it. So right now it's at negative infinity, which negative infinity basically means you're at absolute zero. So it's not sending anything to it. So I'm going to solo this track. So to solo it, that means you're just going to hear this track, right? Click the little S right there. So now if I play it, you're going to hear just the bells. Okay. Now if I start adding the reverb on the return, it's this track right here. I'm just going to crank it all the way up. So this is being added back in on top of the original signal. So this is sort of like doing dry and wet, but a less destructive way. So this is just the reverb track, because I'm just soloing the return. Okay. To get out of solo mode, just click it again, and then all the tracks that you had on will then go back to their regular volume. Okay. What else can we do? Oh, EQ. EQ time. So one of the reasons why I like to do like reverbs and effects on returns is because then you can put like effects on it beforehand. So if you're in Ableton Light, you have channel EQ. So what this does is it shows you how much, like what your frequencies that you're adjusting are. So from left to right is low, mid, high. So high frequencies are the things that are super bright. Lows are like bass and things that shake your room. So I'll start just with this, right? I'm going to solo just the return on the reverb. So I'm just going to remove the low end on it so it doesn't sound so dark. And I'm going to crank the high end up because it feels more airy. Now, a common thing to do also, this is more of a music production thing, but if you put a compressor after your reverb and lower the threshold down on it, it just will like add more, it'll lift the parts after the hit and add some more of the air. So I'm gonna loop it. You can kind of hear more of the room in that case. So I'm going to go back to the main track and solo just the bells with the return. Yeah. So all together. So here's another thing, okay? So say I like this clip, right? But I'm just gonna solo this track. So this is just that drum loop, right? Because we're working at a consistent BPM, 128, this clip is now gridlocked to 128. So it knows that how long, like, the sample should be for it to actually fit that grid size, right? So if you kind of look right here, we're the 1, 1.3, 1.4, 1.2. So this is like the second quarter note, right? Within that bar. You can then do something called warping, right? Now, typical warping, you can just do simple things like transposition. This is going to change the pitch of it, but not the timing. So, what's the difference between when I do that with warp on versus warp off? So I'll turn warp off really quick and then show you. Okay. See how it made the clip longer? So now it's like not at the same BPM. So for this, I'm just going to keep it the same length. Turn warp back on, right? I'm going to show you the other cool thing that warp can do. So within your clip, right, if you right click down here at where like these little slices are, you'll kind of sometimes see Ableton doing this automatically for you. It shows you like these little like grid slices, right? Now with this, if you right click, insert warp marker, it'll make a little yellow handle. So I'm going to do that like a couple of them here. And with this, you can move where your hits are within your grid. So in this case, I'm gonna move that one there and add this one here. And then I'm gonna move this one over here. Hold on 1 second. Like that. So let me play it back. You can get some kind of gnarly stuff with that, but for this case, I'm going to turn warp back off, and it should go back to where oh, it didn't. Alright, well, nice thing about Ableton, if you hold Control Z and keep pressing it until you're kind of back where you started. There. Much better. Alright, cool. Let's go to automation really fast. So automation lets you automate how much like of any effect is turned on over time. So if I turn this on right here, it always goes off the last thing you touched, right? So for instance, I'm gonna just adjust the volume right here and then turn automation on. It'll say what you're automating right here. So in this, it says mixer track volume. So we're adjusting within the mixer the track volume. So I'm gonna adjust the volume on the bells a little bit. So it starts out like really quiet and then gets really loud. And to do that, you add little anchor points onto this little red line will appear, right? And then you add all these little anchor points where you want the fader to move. So for instance, I'm just gonna blast it because that's what I'll do. So right now I have it starting at -4.6 and then it goes up to a +3.6. Don't actually do this, but for instance, you can see how much it's adjusting over time there. And you can have it be gradual as well. So what I will do with that, I just undid everything that I did with that automation clip. I'm gonna adjust how much it's sending to that return track now though. So it's the same thing. So if I click on this right here, it now says A channel EQ reverb compressors. So this is my return track. So I'm adjusting how much it's sending now at this point. So I'm gonna have it start out sending not very much and then a lot at the end. So we'll start there. So you should hear the reverb like appear after like this point basically. So let me play it back. So you can get kind of micromanaging with that at a certain point, if it's just to get your song or your audio to kind of do the thing you want it to. What else would be good? Oh, crossfades. Let's go over crossfades. So, all right. First of all, MIDI doesn't do crossfades. Just assume that. Or does it? Hold on. All right, good. It doesn't. So this only applies to audio tracks. So I'm just going to go back to that drum loop really quick. To adjust the size of how big of something is within your timeline, you can hover your mouse over this little part right here and it makes the track bigger or smaller. So I'm going to start with that. Now you see these little dots that appear right below the name and that like box at the top of your audio track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little box to make it fade in. And then just hit play. And now you should kind of hear it swell in a little bit. Same thing at the end. We can just have it go fade out, fade in. You can kind of see it affecting the waveform too. So that's showing you what audio is coming out. Alright. Alright, so say you have this clip, right? And you're like, I like this part right here. So I want to hear just that. So you're going to want to cut this audio clip. You can do this with MIDI too. But for right now, I'm just going to do it with the audio clip. So you select with your playhead the part you want to cut, right? So right here, you see this white line appear. You can do this by pressing either Control E to make a cut. I'm going to undo. Right click and hit split. It should tell you the hotkey there too, on like most of these tool things. And then now I've made a cut on the audio clip. So now say I want this part right here to be the end of it, right? I make another cut, and now I can just move that part where I want it. So let's say I like the way this hits here, right? But I want to replace this one because it's about the same length. So I select it. To make a copy of it, hold Control, wait for the little hand to show up. Left click, drag it. I'm just gonna plop it right there. So now if I play it, you should hear the same part here as there. So say I didn't like that, or I cut it too short, right? I can drag out the original clip to where I kind of want it. And then say I want just the first part of that sound, right? And then I want some of this to just fade across. You can then use the crossfade tool again to kind of select where that transition happens. So now if I play it, yeah, like that. Okay. Say I'm done and I want to export this, right? I'm going to turn solo off so we get the whole track. So let me just play it again. So what I like to do, I like to take my loop range selection tool right here and select the part I want the actual audio clip that we're going to end, the audio file we're going to end up with at the end to be. So I'll select that. Let's say I want to make this longer too, just so we have more of the same thing repeated because lazy. So select like part of it. You can either shift, or you can either just drag out with your mouse the part you want to select, or you can do what I do, which is I tend to just select everything either with Control A or click on one, hold Shift and click on the top left of the other, and then that selects like the upper limit of that. And so I just want to copy all these tracks, right? Or these clips, right? On these same tracks. Hold Control and then drag them over. And so I'm going to do the same thing again. Like that. Now we have a full 4-bar loop. And so then you just drag out your loop that you want. and say, since I'm making dance music, I'm gonna add another kick at the end there, so it kind of gives it a little bit of groove at the end. Alright, say I like that, right? But say I think the bell should come in later. You can just select the clip you want and hit delete. Or what I like to do when I'm still like figuring stuff out is I select it and then I press 0 on my numpad. And what that does is it deactivates the clip. So say I want to do it to these right here, both of these. I'll play it back really fast. All right, let's say I want to add one more track in, right? Just for fun. So I'm going to add in a cymbal, right? So I'm going to my cymbals right here. So I like this, right? So I'm just going to put it right here. But say I want to use this cymbal as kind of like a lead-in tool. You double click on it and you can reverse it right here. And now it plays the track backwards. So what I like to do is I like to take a cymbal, reverse it, kind of turn it down a little bit so it's not so fucking loud. Add another cymbal afterwards. So like one reverses into the other, and then it just has that nice little crash at the end where your next transition comes in. It's just a good way to get like your ideas to kind of feel more punchy, so like it feels more complete. Again, this isn't really mixed and it's not really that fancy, but it's a starting point, right? And let's see, what else? Oh, rendering. Okay. So you go to File, you select what you want to export with your loop region first. Then you go File, Export Audio, Video. Yours will say 44.1, 16-bit. Should be fine. I have mine set up for 4832. That's just for what I'm doing. That's just a better setting. And then rendered track master. So this is your master track. This is where all your tracks get summed to, is to this one right here. Hit export, and it'll ask you what you want to do, where you want to save it. Name it something. Hit save, it renders out, and then now you have the file rendered.